I'm Rick Backlund, Chair of the DECA Committee for the Greater Kansas City Federal Executive Board. We're excited to have all of you here at this meeting, and we have an exciting panel that's going to be talking. Anyway, we have a monthly program. I believe next month, Larry, is it Deaf Awareness Month, I think?
That is correct.
Yeah, and I think our meeting should be on Thursday, the 6th of April, but more will be coming out. But we have a theme every month. So this attendance today is super exciting, and we hope that you'll join us for future events. So I know that Kristen Day, I believe. Kristen, thank you so much. You're going to be our moderator from the National Records Center. We're excited to have you here with us as well to kind of walk us into the panel, and we'll get things started. So I don't know, Larry, anything you want to add that I missed?
No, we'll talk about some business at the very end, but no, perfect.
Okay, Kristen, well, welcome.
Thank you, Rick. Good afternoon, everyone. DECA Committee, my NRC family, and the other federal employees joining us today. I'm Kristen Day, and I'm the Special Emphasis Program Manager for the National Records Center. This year's theme for Women's History Month is celebrating the voices who tell our stories. And what a better way to kick off this month with the voices of 4 women leaders from the U.S. Citizen and Immigration Service Center's National Records Center. Our goal today is that whatever your role is as a federal employee, that you will come away with something, whether it's a new idea, a fresh perspective, a new strategy, anything that you can take back to your workplace. Before we begin our discussion, I would like to turn it over to the panel members to briefly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their background.
There we go. Okay, can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. So I'm Cindy Munita. I'm the Agency Chief FOIA Officer and Associate Center Director over the FOIA Policy Branch at the National Records Center. So our division is responsible for administering the agency's obligations under the Freedom of Information Act and Privacy Act. So we're responsible for releasing information to the public when they request agency records. So I'm lucky to work with about 300 FOIA professionals who do the heavy lifting every single day to execute our important FOIA mission. But prior to this, I've been with the agency for about 15 years. I started my career off as an immigration services officer at the Kansas City field office. I spent several years after that at the National Benefit Center. And then the position that I had prior to this was as the field office director in Seattle, Washington. So, but now I'm happy to be with the NRC in Lee Summit working for FOIA. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. Tracy, are you there?
Yes, can you not see me?
Oh, okay. I can now. Thank you.
Well, thank you for spotlighting me, especially the mess of my office. I am Tracy Vellesheim. I have been with USCIS for 23 years now in this very cave. When I started, it was still dirt rock floors, the floor hadn't even been finished yet. I put 17 years in with the FOIA unit, and then about 7 years ago, I moved down to handle the immigration records and contract management section. We do the day-to-day handling of the files coming in and going out the door. We have holdings here within the facility of about 16 million files. We also have holdings over at National Archives and Records Administration to the tune of around 44 million files. And we also have an additional, I don't know how many files over at an offsite commercial storage. So we handle all that. We also are responsible for the digitization efforts going on here at the National Records Center, trying to get these records that are needed by agents out in the field digitized so they don't have to deal with the paper record. They can just look at it in the online viewing system we have. Before I came here, I spent some time with the attorneys that represent the IRS in court. So I've had a very long government career, but I started when I was 5, for those of you trying to do the math on that. And I'm like everybody else, I love working here. It's a great place.
Thank you, Tracy. I was about to try to total the amount of years between the panel members of experience, but you threw me off with the started since you were 5. So
Yeah,
about
I did.
100 years of leadership here about, that we're going to bring to the table today. So I appreciate it. And I thank you to the DECA committee for the platform. And I guess without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. We have some pre-designated questions for the panel, and I will list each question and feel free to respond if you have some advice, some input, or personal experience. It's not limited to one panel member per question, but if there's only one panel member that would like to add, that's great. So thank you again. And the first question that we have for you: can you describe your leadership style and how you lead others? And it's a 2-part question. And the second part is it different from your male counterparts?
Is there like a choice of leadership style? Do we go with the funny jokey or the hateful right on? Is there a choice?
It doesn't have to be a formal style, just maybe how you lead or.
I like to lead my staff. They call it lead from the middle. I won't ask them to do anything that I won't do. I respect them. I respect their abilities. I try not to ever have to micromanage. And it doesn't matter whether they're male or female. I expect everyone to pull their weight and do their job. And if they need help, to ask. And we get great results out of our unit.
Thank you, Tracy. That's awesome feedback. Anyone have anything else to add to this, or how you think it might be different than our male counterparts?
I'll jump in a little bit. I think some of the things Tracy said resonated with me as well. I like to be kind of in there knowing how to do everything that my subordinates do. I don't make that 100%, but I try my best. And like Tracy, I, wouldn't ask them to do something I wouldn't do myself. And so, I think it's just my style would be, just really walking the walk, walking the talk, not saying one thing and then going off and acting in a different direction.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to this as well. So I think leadership styles can change and be adapted to what your team or situation calls for. But I suspect most people probably do have a default mode. So for me, it'd probably be more of a democratic or leadership style. So I like to be clear about what the task and goal is and then work with the team to accomplish it. So it does require a lot of communication and helping everyone keep sight of the bigger picture and encouraging participation and, of course, making sure everyone is working toward the same goal. And I think that can sometimes make things take longer when you're doing the talking and getting the input and the feedback, which I know can frustrate people at times, but in the end, it can lead to greater buy-in and participation and more exchange of ideas. So when time isn't a limiting factor, I think that's the default style that I probably have.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yep. To kind of echo, what folks have said, Tracy mentioned micromanaging. I am definitely somebody that, I don't like to, but to kind of, take what Cindy said, depending on the situation, you may have to, if somebody, we get a, important tasker from headquarters that we need to turn around urgently, it may be something that I can't just like launch it and, not stay, engaged on what's happening and where it's at. So definitely kind of a situational thing. Like my preference is to, model, empower my folks to, here's the assignment. I don't, just let me know if you need my help. And then we can kind of check in on a semi-regular basis. But otherwise it's, whatever they need to get it done. But I, I'm not gonna, usually, interject and say, well, this is how I want it done, and these are the specific things you need to make sure you include, and it needs to look this way, and that's like, I don't, want to be in that business. But again, sometimes you just have to, depending on what's going on. It's pretty rare, I think, I hope, but that does happen. And to go to the second part of the question, I don't know that is any different from like male counterparts. I mean, we all have, I think, a little bit different way of leading. And I don't know that it always goes back to like gender or things like that. Mine is, I've had different models. I've had, both men and women as supervisors, men and women as managers, people that I look to for, leadership learning, and there's some commonalities. There's some that are not, but I don't think I know necessarily whether that's attributed just to gender, for instance. So some of it probably is, but.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are all wonderful perspectives, and thank you for tackling that second part there, Brandy. I appreciate it. I have a military background. I retired before I joined everyone at the NRC, and I felt that I had maybe a little bit different leadership style when it came to, I was kind of a mother hen, so my nurture nature versus as a mom kind of spilled over into my leadership style. So not saying that a father can't have the same way, but with me specifically, I felt my leadership style kind of went hand in hand with my parenting style. So I appreciate that. Oh, Tracy, hi.
I was just going to say, to kind of tag on to what Brandy said, I won't say my leadership style differs between male, female, but it will differ between people. You handle the people differently. The people that are more, hey, just tell me what you need. I don't need a lot of fluff. And the people that want to feel needed, the people that need the more instruction, the people that need the whys and the wherefores. And that's kind of how I tailor mine. Your people. If you know your staff, you know how to get them to get the mission accomplished. And believe me, it's not how I deal with my children, because I have zero control over them.
Thank you for that. Yeah, emotional intelligence is key, I think, to taking care of our people and getting the stuff done. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. It's probably maybe a little bit easier, I'm not sure. But what factors impact a woman's ability to lead others? I can't hear you again.
I'll start, so that nobody steals my answer. So I think a part of this is just, having the chance, having the opportunity, having the encouragement to be a leader. I was listening to some of the Percipio vignettes that you provided, Kristen, in our newsletter. And, you still hear these numbers about the, proportion of men to women in leadership positions. And, so I went and we just got some updated numbers for the National Record Center. And we do not, in our leadership ranks, especially upper leadership, reflect our percentages in the lower grades of our organization. So that's something that we need to address, right? So what are we doing as a leadership team that is making it so that like less than a third of our GS14s and above are women? So are we helping women identify that like leadership is something that they're interested in, that supervision is something that they're interested in? Are we giving them opportunities to demonstrate that? Do we have flexibilities or whatever that would allow them to do that? I think there's just a lot to unpack there, but I think just having the opportunity is a big impact on being able to get into and I know I'm referencing more kind of the officially designated like supervisor role, and obviously you can lead from wherever, but that's like an immediate thing for me that draws my attention is like looking at that information and being like, we have some work to do, in our organization, and So what is affecting it here? And, you know, those are some of the things that come to mind. Do we have models? And so, like, you know, Cindy and I, when you look at GS 15 and above in our organization, and there's 9 of us, something like that. We're the only 2 women. So again, you know, there's that saying, you have to see it to be it, I think is the quote. Is that affecting, you know, for women's ability to move up there? You know, they don't see women moving up. Is that discouraging? And again, are we creating opportunities? So I think those are just getting that encouragement and that push, I think affects women's ability to lead others, to get into those positions, or to feel comfortable enough to take on that role.
Yeah, so I was gonna just mention that when we look at the, you know, what factors impact a woman's ability to lead others, first, I hope it goes without saying that we're talking about opportunity, like Brandy said, not capability, because I think we'd all acknowledge that women have the capability to lead, but haven't historically had the same opportunities to lead. So that being said, for me, it comes down to confidence and opportunity. Having confidence in myself is definitely something I grapple with. I try to speak with confidence because that reassures people and gives them confidence that you know what you're talking about. But sometimes I have to convince myself that I do, you know. And so I'd be lying to say if I always feel confident, or that I always feel confident. So it's definitely something I have to check in with myself on. So I guess the next part of that would be, you know, how do I feel confident when I go into a situation? So for me, I try to be as prepared as possible. And I do my research, talk to SMEs, and just try to learn as much as I can about a subject matter. So feeling prepared helps me feel confidence and hopefully portray and convey confidence. But like Brandy said, the other part of this is opportunity. Having opportunities and openness to women in leadership positions means allowing for different points of view and thinking. So opportunity is absolutely a factor that impacts a woman's ability to lead. It also means that having more women in leadership positions, that we're paying it forward. So helping to mentor other women so that they can be prepared to assume leadership roles as well.
Thank you both. That was amazing, different perspectives, and it's refreshing, Brandy, to hear that for the audience and our other, you know, levels of employees, to see that you guys think about it, or you ladies think about it and talk about it, and that it's something that has been discussed amongst the leadership tiers, and then Cindy spinning it around and making it more personable, and that we're all feeling sometimes that way. I appreciate it. And I wasn't sure, Trisha or Tracy, if you wanted to add, or would you like to move on?
Sure, I'll add just a little bit. I think it follows on with what Cindy was saying. And when I heard the question, Kristen, a couple of terms just came to my mind, and that being genuineness and credibility. And to try to get to those two things, you know, when I speak about topics in front of my team, I try to keep, you know, about 80-85% facts, and then the other 15-20%, you know, my feelings on the topic, have my values come through, my passion come through, so that they understand, you know, not only, you know, kind of the who, what, where, and why, but also just, you know, how personally this is affecting me, and what I think about the topic in general. And I think that helps me gain credibility with my team, and kind of foster that ongoing relationship and culture that I want to have on my team.
That's awesome. That takes a lot of patience and planning, but thank you for sharing that. I think that would be hard for me to do. Okay, we can go ahead and move on. All right, the third question, and you might have already touched on this, but what are the benefits to having women in leadership? And you can't say we'll get stuff done, because that's not Just teasing.
Well, then how are we supposed to answer? We can't say our bad answer. I think the benefits to having women in leadership is just a different view, a different opinion. Like you said yourself, sometimes we're more nurture nature than our male counterparts. And we just have different perspectives on things. Again, it just, I think anytime you have different viewpoints at the table, you're going to get a better end product.
Thank you, Tracy. I agree 100%. Okay, then does anyone else want to add to that? Nope. Okay, how can women work across the divides of opinions?
I'll start off on that one. I came from a background of being a very long time GS13 team leader. And one of my favorite things to do in that role is to facilitate a group of people, varying sizes, 4 people, 5 people, on up to, 20 people or so. And what I love to do in that type of situation is really listen to what each person is saying and bringing to the topic, and then kind of help the group pick through all the various comments, and then put together, kind of the best of the greatest hits from what we came up with during the session, and then kind of get to a commitment to move forward with those ideas. So I think just a lot of listening skills go into that. Just kind of being conscientious of, everyone around the table, eye contact, body language, all those types of things. That's helped me be successful in those types of activities.
Yeah, so I think women tend to have cooperative styles of working, and that leads to more participation and perspectives and voices at the table. So I think women tend to be consensus builders, which helps when you have differing opinions. And so at the end of the day, a decision has to be made. And if there are differences in what that decision should be, then working cooperatively, building consensus and letting people voice those differing opinions, really helps with buy-in of the final decision. And like I said before, sometimes deadlines and circumstances don't afford the time needed to do that. But I think as a whole, women tend to be have more cooperative styles.
Thank you both for that. Yes, I agree. And I think that those are good points of view. Coming into the military, I was in a law enforcement career, and it was a primarily male-based career, very few female positions or females that I worked with. So I kind of always felt that I had to work a little harder, be a little faster, just do a little bit more. And I don't know if it's still that way. That was years ago, but I feel like having these discussions probably help adding to the divide, just talking about the things and amongst ourselves and with our employees. So all right, let's see the next question. What do you think is the most significant barrier to female leadership?
I can start. So, I mentioned, having the encouragement, if women don't have that, I feel like that's so I think maybe women more than men need the specific, like, hey, this would be a good job for you. You should put in for this. Whereas, I think there's, some studies that have been done that say that, women will only put in for a position if they're like 100% qualified for it, whereas men don't need to be 100% qualified. Like they, will put in for it, even if they don't meet all the qualifications that are listed. So, going maybe a little bit to what Cindy said about, having confidence and like being, taking that, that step where it wouldn't maybe naturally be something that you would seek it, maybe not something that you would naturally do, like, oh, well, I don't meet all the qualifications for that, be a little risky and put that in. But I know, like, I personally have, a hard time with rejection. So some of those things you got to have a balance, right? Like, you can't put yourself out there so much that you're banging your head against the wall or something, like, that gets to be too much. But at the same time, be a little risky. I do think that, another kind of issue is, women are kind of default, and I think I was hearing it a little bit, take on the kind of emotional labor. And so, they get relied upon for those types of things. And so it isn't maybe, and I don't think it's necessarily like deliberate, but it's like, oh, well, we don't want, this woman to advance because we need her to stay here and help us, like, with our team cohesion and like with all the, taking care of everybody, like when there's a death or birthday or whatever, like, it's women usually, not always, but usually that are taking on those tasks. So sometimes, that could be an issue. I hope it's not a deliberate thing, but I wonder sometimes about like that piece of it. The the women are the note takers and those types of things. So like being in that position or having that role, like, does that affect women's like being encouraged to and seeing a place for them in leadership because of those things?
Thank you, Brandy. That was pretty awesome thing that I don't think I've thought about. And from your point of view, coming from probably being that person. So I appreciate that. Anyone want to add to the barrier question? If not, we can move. Well, actually, we'll get a little bit more specific with the barriers question. And can anyone share what the most significant barrier has been in your career?
I can start on this one if you'd like. So I think to add on to what Brandy was saying about taking risks, I think one of the barriers in my career has been myself, because maybe it takes me, I'm a little more risk adverse sometimes. And so, being willing to take that risk and apply for the job, I think is an important thing to do. When I first started my career, my first position was as an immigration services officer at the Kansas City field office, which is relatively, compared to the NRC, is a much smaller group of a much smaller office. And so I had been in that position for about 6 years. I was very comfortable in that position. And so I, had to decide whether to stay there or take a risk and go to another office where there were promotional opportunities. And so that's what I ultimately did. Was I applied for a position in Lee Summit, and I ended up thankfully getting it. And from there, I worked at that office for a couple of years and then took another risk to move to Seattle, Washington. I was lucky that I was able to do so. But it was a risky decision in the sense that I was moving to a city I'd never been to, and assuming a field office director position. And so, I'd be lying if I said that I felt 100% ready for that position. I don't think you ever are, because it was a pretty major position. But I took the risk and I moved out there, and it was a great learning opportunity that opened a lot of doors for me. So at each point, to get a promotion, I did have to take some risk and look outside of the office that I was in, and it has really benefited me in my career.
Thank you for sharing. After the after the call and our work's finished this evening, all of us on the line are going to go apply for all these jobs that involve risk and confidence. So I appreciate that. Anyone want to add to what Cindy was saying?
I will just add, and tack onto what Brandy and Cindy both said. My biggest obstacle to my career has always been myself, because I get comfortable in the job I'm at and I feel a responsibility to it. Like, if I leave, who's going to do it? Because obviously nobody else could do this. It's unique just to me. And I've always been risk adverse, like Cindy said, to going out and taking that chance. I mean, I love my job and I will never leave unless they make me leave. I get comfortable and I see it's, you know, you think you have the way that, ooh, I know what I'm doing. I'm confident in this, and I really wanting to learn something new. I will say though, throughout my career, my coworkers and my supervisors and my leaders have all been nothing but supportive of me trying new things and, you know, trying to encourage me to do things, especially when I was a younger person at my other job. They wanted to see me move up, and there wasn't a whole lot of potential at that place. But I did make it to the top of where my potential was because I wasn't an attorney. And then the same with working here at the NRC. The leadership here has been exceptional at giving you growth opportunities and helping you get the confidence and the nerve, if you will, to jump off that ledge and hit that submit button on USA Job. So yes, and as somebody once said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And as I always tell people, if there's a job out there, apply for it. You don't know what's going to happen on that cert. You don't know who's going to hit it. You don't know who's going to apply. And the worst you can do is get told no, and then you still have a job and just move on. But never stop trying.
Yeah, I would agree with Tracy that, you know, the biggest barrier to, you know, me taking on a bigger job or a different job would just be myself and all the different roles and hats that I wear as, you know, a wife, a mother, a caregiver to aging parents and a full-time employee and kind of how much I want to give to each of those. And then, you know, kind of looking at that next job in that realm and how would that or not fit. And so, yeah, I think just bottom line, biggest barrier I've really ever encountered is just myself.
I see a going rate here for this, so taking notes. Thank you. Okay. Moving on. How do you balance career, personal life, and passions? And do you feel that there is such thing as a balance? Which, Tricia, you briefly just touched on that.
So I can just say a little bit here. I don't have, you know, a significant other, kids or things like that. So it's, I think, easier for me. But I will say, like, you know, just I think you have to make choices, like Tricia was saying, like, you know, where do I want to go in my career? I'm not, you know, I don't necessarily have like, here's where I want to be in 3 years, 5 years, that type of thing, like this specific position. But like, are there things that I want to do in my career? But then I also have these other things that I like to do outside of work. So I'm going to use all of my leave, right? Like I have lose leave going into each year. I'm going to make sure I use all of that. So I will, you know, come up with, you know, things around my hobbies. I like to read, so I like to go to book conventions and author signings and stuff like that. I make time for that. I take leave for that. I make sure that my folks are kept up to speed on things, so when I do take leave, I don't have to worry about it. You know, I have, you know, organizations that I'm involved in outside of work, and so there are meetings in the evening. So like, I'm not going to be glued to my work phone, which, sorry folks, but like I'm not, you know, always checking my email and stuff. So it's like, hey, here's my personal cell phone number. If there's like you know, something's on fire, text me on my personal phone, because, you know, I stay away from the work stuff if there's not anything urgent going on. But I'm lucky to be able to have that kind of, you know, cut off, and like, you know, work supports that and that type of thing, that, you know, I can have that, draw that line. When I'm on leave, I'm on leave. You know, obviously here's my personal cell phone if something urgent, but otherwise, I'm not gonna, engage with folks. I know other people, again, they can't maybe do that with their career, or they don't feel like they can do that. But that's a choice I've made, is to say, no, I'm drawing that line, and when I can, that's what I do. And I do devote time to, outside organizations and the things that interest me. I'm starting to freak out about what I'm going to do when I retire. So I'm trying to build out, hey, what are the interests I want to kind of take into that type of thing. So I don't know that it's a balance. I would probably love to spend more time on, the things outside of work, but I have done what I can to have time for those things that do interest me, and, have a full-time career. But again, I'm lucky in that aspect, I think, because, I don't have kids. I don't have, those other kind of big obligations to deal with. So.
That whole work-life balance is a real thing. And it depends on where you're at in your life, how you manage it. When my children were little, my parents were also starting to fail in health. So I had about an 8-10 year period there where home was very hectic, work was hectic. And when kids are little, you don't travel as much. But I have seen that swing. Both my parents have now passed. My children have grown, still living at home, because God forbid they leave. But I've seen it swing. And as the children have matured, or aged, I won't say matured because it's like a frat house. But my husband and I take more and more trips, even if it's just a weekend getaway someplace. And I've learned to, I take my phone. I'm not going to lie. I check it. We all know this. But I limit myself to how long. And I fully enjoy the time when we're out. And I have hobbies too. My biggest hobby is reading. Brandy and I kind of share that. And I can get lost in a book and then just give it up, because I will read all night long. I mean, this is not an issue for me. But you just have to be conscious of what you're doing. And this applies to everyone, and no matter what walk of life you're at, you just have to be conscious of your life and making time for yourself. Because if you're not making time for yourself, then your work is going to suffer, because you're going to be burned out. You're going to feel grouchy because you've never had any away time from it. And when you get that away time, you meet people, you get in different situations, and those will relate back to a work event at some point. I can almost promise you that.
Yeah, I'll just mention I definitely struggle with stopping at the end of the workday, because I like to, complete things and clear off my desk, so to speak, at the end of the day. But there's never enough hours in the workday, and I, at the end of the day, I tell myself there's tomorrow, and I hate when I can't respond to emails and people have to send me a second email. I hate that, but there's only so many hours of the day, and I do have to prioritize my time and do as much as I can. But I just like to be present. So when I'm at work, I'm present at work, and when I'm in my personal life, I'm present in my personal life. And so I do try and separate those two things and try and turn off my work brain at the end of the day, but it's not always easy.
Those are all wonderful perspectives. Thank you. I felt similar. I don't know if anyone else struggled when we went to the pandemic started and we switched at home. I couldn't put it down. I did not want to not be on my computer because I needed to help. I was in the military at the time, but I was stretched so thin. Even though you think it would be easier while you're at home to handle everything, it actually made it more difficult. And I think I was, 12 to 14-hour days just trying to get it all done, because we're going through a significant change to the remote world. So yes, and the balance, I think, like Tracy said, it fluctuates depending on when and where. It's not a daily balance, but that helps. But the long-term balance, I think, is the big picture. So I appreciate all of your perspectives on that. So we have one more question, and then we'll see if there's anything from the audience if they have any follow-ups to some of the great points that you've made so far. So lastly, do you think that there are different business sectors have greater gender diversity or women in leadership, and why do you think that is so? So, Brandy, you briefly talked about leadership versus the other echelons of employees. So do you have anything else to add to that?
I do, wonder, because there's, in the, private sector, they've got, a little bit more flexibility with hiring, I think. And so they might be able to kind of more consciously, seek out, women to fill a particular position, whereas we're not going to do that in the government. We may desire that, but like there's a process folks have to work through, and everybody starts out on a fairly level playing field. Like gender's not a factor in selection, right? So I wonder sometimes, from that perspective, they probably have, a little bit of a leg up if they take on this type of work to make sure that they have, gender representation across like boards of directors and things like that, which I've read some about that, where like they make choices to, have a 50-50 or something like that, board. And I think somebody mentioned already, maybe Cindy, there is like kind of there's been some, studies and books written about how like once you hit a certain amount of women on like a board of directors, you can definitely see a change in how the company operates, and they're, maybe more ethical, and a few other things that, again, bringing that diversity of thought, diversity of experience to the board, affects the company and the decisions that they make and how they do business. So I think that applies for sure for government. So those are things that kind of run through my mind around this particular question. I think there are, occupations, business sectors that have maybe been more traditionally women leaning, but, like education and, some other areas like that are probably going to maybe have more women. But I think across the board, business seems to be looking at this differently now, whether it's, having an impact or not. There's still, I think, still a lot of, men running like tech companies and stuff like that. So how do we change that? Because that has implications on a lot of things in our lives now. So yeah, I'll stop there and let others talk.
I'll go ahead and go next. I recently rewatched a favorite movie of mine, Hidden Figures, and I was watching the movie, and I had forgotten about a little piece of it. It was when the character, Katherine Johnson, she's wanting to attend briefings because the work and calculations that she's doing are sometimes, by the time she found out what the requirements were, the work she had put in was kind of null and void at that point. So she wanted to go to briefings so she would be as up to date as possible on what calculations were needed. And there's a line in the movie, well, Catherine, women don't go to briefings. And it just hit me really, really kind of raw. I hadn't heard anything like that, out of someone's mouth in any kind of recent time. So I was just I sat there just kind of mad for a minute or two and just kind of thought about that, I guess that industry, the space industry or that time when that occurred. And then another thing is I really like to watch sports. And so it's interesting to me to see, women really coming into different roles in professional sports, whether it's coaching positions, referees, ownership, that kind of thing. So, I think that's probably one of the last industries that, is very male dominated, but women are starting to hold some of those roles.
Yeah, I want to add to something Brandy said that made me think of something. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that, in the government with our hiring frameworks, that it's built to create a level playing field, whereas which is a great thing. But in the private sector, there are organizations out there that are moving beyond that and trying to find ways to include in their, say, resume review rubrics or interview questions, and the ratings associated with those, ways to include different perspectives in there. So they may build into their resume review rubric, does the candidate have experience or qualifications, or will they be able to bring it, are they somebody who would be able to include differing opinions in, and maybe they include that in their interview matrix as well. And so that's something that I've been thinking about recently. And so to the extent that we're not doing that in the government, it could be something that we learn from private industry that is trying to make their workforce more diverse, whether that's gender or anything else. And so I don't know, it's just something I've been thinking about recently, and Brandy's comment made me think of it.
Thank you, Cindy, Trisha, Brandy, and Tracy. I love that book and movie, Hidden Figures. And yes, Cindy and Brandy, I think that the societal shift takes time for us to kind of catch up with what from the time of that movie to where we are now. It's not a very long period of time, and yet we've grown so much. And it's great to be able to reflect and talk about that with you, my leaders, today. So before I wrap it up, does any of the panel members have anything you'd like to add?
Nope. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me participate.
Thank you.
Yeah, same. Very interesting. Great panel today, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Trisha.
Thanks, Kristen. It was really fun to participate today, and I always love hearing what the other women on the panel have to say. I always learn something, so thank you.
Thank you all. I hope that the discussion today was able to facilitate meaningful dialogue to everyone and in our audience. I certainly took away several things. Again, Brandy, Cindy, Tracy, thank you.